Commander Zethka of the Vorthak Empire stood on the bridge of his battleship, watching the blue planet slowly rotate below, his four arms crossed behind his back in the traditional pose of contemplation. The reconnaissance mission had been simple enough. Observe the primitive species called humans, assess their threat level, and report back to High Command. What he hadn't expected was to find a species that had somehow mastered faster-than-light travel while still fighting among themselves with projectile weapons. Commander, his second-in-command, Captain Vex T, approached with measured steps. The human delegation has arrived. They're requesting permission to board. Zethka's primary eyes focused on the tactical display, while his secondary eyes continued monitoring the planet below. The humans had responded to their arrival not with fear or aggression, but with curiosity and an offer to talk. This was unprecedented in Vorthak military history. Have they been scanned for weapons? Zethka asked, his voice carrying the natural harmonic undertones of his species. Yes, Commander. They carry no energy weapons. Some primitive projectile devices, but our shields would render them harmless. However, Vex T paused, consulting his datapad. They've also brought something they call food gifts. Our scanners cannot determine their purpose. Zethka turned all four eyes toward his captain. In over 30 cycles of military service, he had never encountered a species that brought gifts to a first contact scenario. The Vorthak way was clear. Superior technology meant superior species. Yet these humans seemed to operate under entirely different principles. Food gifts, Zethka repeated. Are they attempting to poison us? Unknown, sir. The chemical composition shows various organic compounds, but nothing immediately toxic to our physiology. The humans claim it's a gesture of friendship. The word friendship translated poorly into Vorthak. Their language had concepts for alliance, mutual benefit, and temporary cooperation, but the human concept of friendship seemed to exist purely for emotional satisfaction rather than strategic advantage. Very well. Escort them to Conference Chamber 3. Activate full environmental shields and have medical standing by. Zethka straightened his uniform, the dark blue fabric marked with the silver insignia of his rank. And Captain, record everything. High Command will want to study every aspect of this encounter. 20 minutes later, Zethka entered the conference chamber to find 3 humans waiting. They stood when he entered, which he recognized as a sign of respect common to many species. What struck him immediately was their diversity. Where Vorthak were uniformly tall, gray-skinned, and four-armed, these humans varied dramatically in skin tone, hair color, and physical build. The tallest human stepped forward. Commander, I'm Ambassador Sarah Chun, representing the United Earth Government. This is Colonel James Murphy, our military liaison, and Dr. Elena Rodriguez, our xenobiologist. Zethka noted that the human called Chun appeared to be the leader despite being neither the largest nor the most decorated. Another peculiarity to report. I am Commander Zethka of the Vorthak Empire. Your presence here is unexpected. He gestured toward the conference table with one of his lower arms. Please be seated. As they arranged themselves around the triangular table, Zethka observed the humans more closely. Their movements were fluid but inefficient, their skin appeared vulnerable to temperature and pressure changes, and they seemed to require frequent hydration. Yet they had built spacecraft capable of interstellar travel. The contradiction was puzzling. Ambassador Chun smiled, an expression Zethka's cultural database identified as indicating pleasure or friendliness. Commander, before we begin formal discussions, we'd like to honor an important human tradition. When meeting new friends, we share food. She gestured to Colonel Murphy, who opened a large container he had been carrying. The smell that emerged caused every Vorthak in the room to freeze. It was unlike anything in their collective experience, complex, layered, and somehow appealing in a way that triggered responses in parts of their brains typically associated with survival instincts. This is pizza, Dr. Rodriguez explained, lifting out a circular, flat object covered in various colored substances. It's one of humanity's most beloved foods. We also brought chocolate, fresh bread, and some fruit. Zethka's primary sense organs analyzed the chemical signatures. His species had evolved past the need for complex nutrition, subsisting on processed nutrient blocks that provided exactly what their bodies required, nothing more. The concept of food as anything beyond fuel was foreign. You wish us to consume these substances? He asked carefully. Only if you want to, Chin replied. We understand your biology might be different, but sharing meals is how humans build trust and friendship. Captain Vexti leaned closer to Zethka. Sir, medical reports indicate these substances would be digestible for us, though unnecessary for our nutritional needs. Zethka studied the pizza slice Chen offered him. The humans watched expectantly, their faces showing what his cultural database suggested was hope mixed with nervous anticipation. In 3 decades of military service, he had never been in a situation remotely like this. The logical course was to politely decline and proceed with standard first contact protocols. These humans clearly posed no immediate military threat. They could be classified as a developing species and left to their own affairs while the Empire focused on more pressing concerns. But something about their eager faces made him hesitate. Throughout Vorthak history, first contact with new species followed predictable patterns. Displays of superior technology, establishment of dominance hierarchies, negotiation of terms. These humans seemed genuinely excited about the prospect of sharing their food, as if the act itself held more importance than any strategic advantage it might provide. Very well, Zethka said, accepting the pizza slice. In the interest of cultural exchange, he lifted the slice toward his mouth, noting how the humans leaned forward slightly, clearly invested in his response. The first contact protocols said nothing about this situation. He was quite literally venturing into uncharted territory. The moment the pizza touched his tongue, Zethka's universe changed. The explosion of flavor was unlike anything in Vorthak experience, where their nutrient blocks provided sustenance through carefully calibrated chemical reactions. This human food created sensations his species had never evolved to process. The combination of what the humans called cheese, tomato sauce, and bread created layer upon layer of taste that seemed to cascade through his consciousness. His 4 eyes widened simultaneously as his brain struggled to categorize the experience. The closest analogy in Vorthak culture would be the meditation chambers where young officers learned to quiet their minds. But this was the opposite, a symphony of sensation that demanded attention and somehow provided satisfaction beyond mere nutrition. Commander? Colonel Murphy asked, concern evident in his voice. Are you all right? Zethka realized he had been standing motionless for nearly 30 seconds, the pizza slice still in his hand. Around the table, his own officers watched with expressions ranging from concern to fascination. Captain Vexti had his medical scanner ready, clearly prepared to intervene if their commander showed signs of distress. I am. Zethka paused, searching for words in either language to describe what he was experiencing. This is highly unusual. He took another bite, this time prepared for the sensory impact. If anything, the second experience was more intense than the first. His mind began analyzing the components, the textural contrast between the crispy exterior and soft interior of the bread, the way the cheese created a creamy coating that enhanced rather than masked the other flavors, the subtle acidity of the tomato sauce that seemed to brighten every other element. Dr. Rodriguez was watching him with the focused attention of a scientist observing a fascinating specimen. Commander, would you be willing to describe what you're experiencing? Your food is... Zethka took a third bite, noting how each area of his tongue seemed to respond differently to different components. Your food appears to serve no survival function, yet creates responses in our neural pathways that we have no framework to understand. Ambassador Chun smiled again, this time with what appeared to be genuine warmth. That's exactly right, Commander. Food, for humans, isn't just about survival. It's about pleasure, comfort, memory, and connection. Connection. When humans share meals, we bond. It's one of our most fundamental social behaviors. The act of eating together builds trust and relationship in ways that pure logic cannot. Zethka finished the pizza slice and found himself looking toward the container where more pieces waited. This was problematic. Vorthak were taught from birth to consume only what was necessary, to avoid excess in all forms. Yet something about this human food made him want to continue the experience. May I? He gestured toward the container. Of course. Chen immediately offered him another slice, this one with different colored substances arranged on top. This one has pepperoni and mushrooms. The second slice proved even more complex than the first. The spiced meat added elements that seemed to enhance every other flavor, while the mushrooms provided an entirely new texture and taste that his brain cataloged as somehow earth-like and satisfying in ways he couldn't articulate. Captain Vexti accepted a slice when offered, and Zethka watched his second-in-command experience the same bewildering cascade of sensations. Around the table, his other officers began sampling the human offerings, each showing the same mixture of confusion and fascination. "Commander," Vexti said quietly in Vorthak, "this is beyond our cultural protocols. Should we be concerned?" Zethka considered the question while savoring what the humans called chocolate, a substance that seemed to create entirely different but equally intense responses in his nervous system. The logical answer was yes. They were experiencing something completely outside their frame of reference, something that served no apparent survival function, yet created powerful positive responses. But as he watched his officers sharing food with the humans, something unprecedented was happening. The typical formal distance maintained in first contact scenarios was dissolving. Lieutenant Keximo was actually laughing at something Colonel Murphy had said. Science Officer Quinare was engaged in animated discussion with Dr. Rodriguez about the biochemistry of taste. "No," Zethka replied finally. "I believe we're learning something important about these humans. Something that intelligence reports and tactical analyses could never reveal." Ambassador Chen had been listening to their exchange with obvious curiosity. "Commander, if I may ask, what is food like for your people?" "Efficient," Zethkar replied immediately. "We consume nutrient blocks that provide exactly what our bodies require for optimal function. No more, no less. The concept of food as experience is unknown to us. But you're enjoying this?" Zethka paused mid-chew of what the humans call bread with butter. Enjoyment was another concept that translated poorly into Vorthak. Their language had words for satisfaction at completing objectives, pride in efficient performance, and contentment with optimal outcomes. But pure enjoyment for its own sake? "I believe so," he said slowly, "though we lack proper terminology for what we're experiencing." Dr. Rodriguez leaned forward excitedly. "That's fascinating. You're discovering pleasure responses that your culture never developed language for. In humans, taste is tied to memory, emotion, and social bonding in ways we're still studying." As if to prove her point, Zethka found himself thinking about his family unit back on the Vorthak homeworld. His parents, who had raised him with strict adherence to military efficiency. His sibling units, who had chosen scientific rather than military paths. For the first time, he wondered what it would be like to share this experience with them. The thought was so foreign to Vorthak military doctrine that it should have triggered immediate concern. Family connections were considered potential weaknesses, distractions from duty, and optimal performance. Yet the human food somehow made him want to share something positive with beings he cared about. "This is problematic," he murmured, more to himself than to others. Colonel Murphy overheard. "Why is that, Commander?" "Because," Zethka said, accepting yet another piece of chocolate, "this experience serves no logical purpose, yet I find myself wanting more. Wanted to understand why you would develop such complexity in something as basic as nutrition." "Maybe that's exactly the point," Ambassador Chen suggested. "Humans learned long ago that life is about more than just survival. Yes, we need to eat to live. But we also discovered that how we eat, what we eat, and who we eat with can make the difference between merely surviving and actually living." Zethka pondered this distinction as he sampled what the humans called fruit, sweet, juicy spheres that seemed to contain concentrated sunshine. The Vorthak had achieved remarkable technological advancement through their focus on efficiency and logic. They had eliminated war, poverty, and inefficiency from their society. But they had also, he was beginning to realize, eliminated something else. Something these humans had kept despite their technological limitations and social chaos. Something that made a simple meal feel like a discovery of new possibilities. As the impromptu meal continued, formal first contact protocols became secondary to the simple pleasure of sharing food and conversation. Zethka watched his officers engage with the humans in ways that would have been unthinkable hours earlier, and found himself facing a question that would have far-reaching implications for both species. What if efficiency wasn't everything? What if these humans, with their seemingly irrational focus on pleasure and connection, had discovered something the advanced Vorthak Empire had lost along the way to civilization? The pizza was nearly gone, but Zethka found himself hoping this strange, wonderful experience would continue. For the first time in his military career, he was learning about something more important than tactics or technology. He was learning about joy, and that realization would change everything. 3 days had passed since the initial food-sharing ceremony, and Commander Zethka found his carefully ordered military existence in complete upheaval. He stood in his private quarters, staring at his reflection in the polished metal wall panel, trying to understand what was happening to him. The regulation nutrient block sat untouched on his desk, the same processed gray cube he had consumed twice daily for 30 years without thought or complaint. Today, the sight of it filled him with something his language had no word for. Revulsion? Disappointment? The closest Vorthack term translated roughly to functional dissatisfaction, but that seemed inadequate. His door chimed. "Enter," he called, composing himself into proper military posture. Captain Vexti stepped inside, carrying what appeared to be a violation of every regulation in the Vorthack military handbook, a human food container. His second-in-command's usually precise uniform was slightly disheveled, and there was something different about his bearing, looser, less rigid. "Captain," Zethka said carefully, "what is that?" "Sir, the humans. Ambassador Chun specifically. She taught our food preparation unit how to make something called grilled cheese sandwiches." Vexti held up the container with what could only be described as excitement. "Commander, you have to try this." The informality of the statement should have resulted in immediate disciplinary action. A Vorthack officer did not tell his commander what he had to do. Yet Zethka found himself more interested in the container's contents than in correcting the breach of protocol. "Show me," he said. Vexti opened the container, releasing a warm, rich aroma that immediately triggered the same neural responses Zethka had experienced with the pizza. Inside were two golden-brown, triangular objects that seemed to radiate heat and an almost magnetic appeal. "The process is remarkable, sir. They take this substance called bread, not processed like our nutrient blocks, but somehow grown and shaped, and combine it with heated cheese and butter. The chemical reactions create entirely new compounds that our sensors detect, but cannot categorize." Zethka accepted one of the triangles, noting its warmth and the way the exterior created a slight resistance before giving way to reveal the melted interior. The first bite sent familiar waves of sensation through his consciousness. The crispy texture of the bread's surface, the creamy richness of the cheese, the subtle complexity of what humans called butter. But this time, instead of confusion, he felt something approaching understanding. The food wasn't just nutrition. It was an experience designed to create pleasure for its own sake. And, more than that, it was a form of communication. "Captain," he said slowly, "I want you to arrange a meeting with Dr. Rodriguez. I have questions about human food culture that our standard protocols cannot answer." "Actually, sir, there's something else. The humans have invited our senior staff to something called a dinner party tonight. Ambassador Chun says it's how humans conduct important negotiations over what they call a home-cooked meal." The concept of conducting military negotiations during food consumption struck Zethka as wildly inappropriate. It violated every principle of Vorthack diplomatic training, which emphasized formal settings, clear hierarchies, and elimination of distracting factors. Yet his recent experiences suggested that human approaches might yield different, possibly superior, results. "Very well. Inform his senior staff." "But Captain," Zethka fixed his subordinate with a direct stare. "This is unprecedented. We are venturing into unknown territory with potential consequences for the Empire. Document everything." That evening, Commander Zethka and 5 of his senior officers found themselves in the human ship's dining area, seated around a large table laden with more food varieties than Zethka had known existed. The humans had somehow transformed what should have been a sterile negotiation environment into something warm and inviting. Ambassador Chun stood at one end of the table, looking genuinely pleased to see them. "Commander, officers, welcome to our dining room. Tonight, we've prepared what we call a traditional feast, foods from different human cultures, each with its own story and meaning." Dr. Rodriguez gestured to various dishes. "This is lasagna from Earth's Italian region, layers of pasta, cheese, and meat sauce. Here we have curry from India with rice and bread called naan. This is sushi from Japan, raw fish prepared in specific ways. And this is barbecue from Earth's American South, slow-cooked meat with special sauces." Each description triggered responses in Zethka's enhanced olfactory sensors. The complexity was overwhelming, dozens of distinct chemical signatures combining to create an almost symphonic array of potential experiences. Colonel Murphy raised a glass containing a dark liquid. Commander, in human culture, we begin shared meals with what we call a toast, a statement of hope or celebration. A toast. We raise our glasses together and make a wish or share a hope. Tonight, I'd like to toast to new friendships between our species. Zethka found himself holding a glass of what Dr. Rodriguez had explained was wine, fermented fruit juice that somehow enhanced rather than detracted from the food experience. The concept of consuming substances that serve no nutritional purpose purely for pleasure continued to challenge his understanding of logical behavior. Yet as he raised his glass with the others, something significant happened. The simple act of coordinated movement, of shared intention, created a moment of connection that transcended species differences. To new friendships, he repeated, surprised to find he meant it. The meal that followed redefined Zethka's understanding of nearly everything he thought he knew about civilization and culture. Each dish told a story. The lasagna represented human innovation in combining simple ingredients into complex experiences. The curry demonstrated how humans use spices to create warmth and comfort. The sushi showed their appreciation for natural flavors enhanced through precise technique. But more than the food itself, the process fascinated him. Humans didn't simply consume their meals, they discussed them. They shared memories triggered by particular tastes, debated the merits of different preparation methods, and used food as a foundation for exploring deeper topics. Commander, Ambassador Chun said during the curry course, I'm curious about Vorthak family structures. Do you share meals with your family units? Vorthak consume nutrition efficiently, Zethka replied automatically, then paused. Though I find myself wondering what my parents would make of this experience. You're thinking about them differently now. The question struck deeper than he expected. Yes, for the first time, I'm considering them not as biological predecessors who fulfilled their reproductive obligations, but as individuals I might enjoy spending time with. That's the power of shared meals, Dr. Rodriguez observed. Food triggers memory and emotion in ways we're still studying. It connects us to our past and to each other. Science Officer Quinare looked up from his analysis device. Dr. Rodriguez, our instruments detect chemical compounds in these foods that have no nutritional value, yet seem to enhance the overall experience. Can you explain this? Absolutely. Humans discovered that eating isn't just about survival. It's about pleasure, comfort, and social bonding. We developed what we call flavors specifically to make eating enjoyable. But why? Lieutenant Kexamo asked. Efficiency would suggest consuming only necessary nutrients. Colonel Murphy laughed, a sound that still startled the Vorthak officers but no longer alarmed them. Lieutenant, humans learned long ago that life is about more than just survival. Yes, we could survive on nutrition bars and water, but we discovered that how we live matters as much as whether we live. As if to demonstrate this point, Ambassador Chun brought out dessert, something called chocolate cake that pushed Zethka's sensory experiences into entirely new territory. The rich, sweet complexity seemed designed purely to create pleasure, with no practical function whatsoever. This serves no survival purpose, he observed, taking a third bite. Exactly, Chin smiled. That's what makes it wonderful. It exists purely to bring joy. The concept of creating something purely for joy challenged fundamental Vorthak philosophy. Their entire civilization was built on efficiency, optimization, and practical purpose. Yet this human dessert made him feel something his language could only approximate as happiness, contentment. The English word joy seemed to encompass something beyond Vorthak emotional categories. Ambassador, he said slowly, I'm beginning to understand why your species has developed so differently from ours. You've maintained focus on what you call quality of life, not just optimization of function. That's right. And, Commander, that's led to innovations our efficiency-focused approach might never have discovered. When you're trying to make something delicious instead of just functional, you often stumble onto entirely new possibilities. As the evening progressed, the formal boundaries between the species continued to dissolve. Zethka found himself laughing at human jokes, sharing stories from his military service, and, most surprisingly, enjoying himself in ways he hadn't thought possible. Captain Vexti was deep in conversation with Dr. Rodriguez about human cooking techniques. Lieutenant Keximo and Colonel Murphy were comparing military traditions. The entire atmosphere was unlike anything in Zethka's experience. Collaborative without being competitive, warm without being inefficient. But as the meal wound down, reality began to reassert itself. He was a Vorthak military commander with specific orders and responsibilities. His mission was to assess human capabilities and report back to high command. He was not here to develop personal attachments or question fundamental principles of Vorthak civilization. Yet as he looked around the table at his officers engaging with humans as individuals rather than specimens, he realized something profound had already changed. They were no longer simply observing human culture. They were participating in it. And that participation was revealing aspects of existence that Vorthak efficiency had optimized away. "Commander," Ambassador Chen said quietly, "you look troubled." "I am considering the implications of what we've experienced here," he replied honestly. "My species has achieved remarkable technological advancement through our focus on efficiency and logic. But you've shown us something we eliminated from our culture, something that might be more important than we realized." "What's that?" "The ability to find joy in simple pleasures. The understanding that how you live matters as much as whether you achieve your objectives." He paused, looking at his half-finished dessert. "You've made me question whether advancement requires abandoning everything that isn't strictly necessary." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Commander, every species faces that choice as they develop. Do you optimize for survival and efficiency, or do you also optimize for happiness and meaning? Humans chose both, even when it seems contradictory. And the result? We're messier than your people, less efficient, more chaotic. But we're also more adaptable, more creative, and possibly more resilient. Because when times get tough, we have something to fight for beyond mere survival. We have lives we actually enjoy living." As Zethka prepared to return to his ship, he carried with him more than just the memory of exceptional food. He carried the beginning of a transformation in his understanding of what civilization could be. The humans had shown him that advancement didn't require abandoning joy. It could actually be enhanced by embracing it. But now came the harder question. What was he going to do with this knowledge? And how would he explain to high command that the greatest discovery of his mission hadn't been about human military capabilities or technological potential, but about the revolutionary concept that life could be about more than just efficient function? The answer would determine not just the future relationship between their species, but the future direction of Vorthak civilization itself. Commander Zethka stood before the holographic display in his ready room, staring at the half-completed report that would determine the future of human-Vorthak relations. The standard template called for threat assessment, technological evaluation, and strategic recommendations. But how could he explain that the most significant discovery of his mission had nothing to do with weapons or defenses? The door chimed. "Enter." To his surprise, it wasn't Captain Vexti who stepped through, but Lieutenant Keximo carrying another of those human food containers. The young officer's usually perfect posture showed the same relaxed confidence that had been spreading through his crew since their culinary encounters began. "Commander, forgive the interruption, but Dr. Rodriguez taught me how to make something called breakfast. She said it's the human morning meal, and that sharing it helps people think more clearly." Zethka should have reprimanded the lieutenant for the improper approach, for the assumption that his commander needed help thinking clearly, for the entire breach of protocol. Instead, he found himself curious about this new human concept. "Breakfast?" "Yes, sir. They believe certain foods consumed at the beginning of their daily cycle enhance mental function and emotional stability. Dr. Rodriguez called it comfort food, nourishment that provides psychological as well as physical benefits." Keximo opened the container to reveal what appeared to be round, flat objects covered in a thick, amber-colored liquid, accompanied by strips of something crispy and aromatic. The smell triggered the now-familiar cascade of sensory responses, but also something new, a sense of warmth and comfort that seemed to emanate from the food itself. "These are called pancakes with syrup and bacon," Keximo explained, his excitement evident despite his attempt to maintain military bearing. "The process is fascinating, Commander. The pancakes involve a chemical reaction called cooking, where basic ingredients transform into something entirely new. And the syrup comes from a plant. They extract sweetness from trees. Despite everything he had learned about human food culture, this still amazed Zethka. The humans had discovered ways to extract pleasure from their environment that went far beyond simple resource gathering. They had turned survival into art. Sir, Kexamo continued, may I ask you something? Proceed. Since we began eating with the humans, I've noticed changes in our crew. Not just enjoyment of the food, but increased cooperation, more creative problem-solving, improved morale. Science Officer Quinn R.A. has developed 3 new theoretical approaches to quantum mechanics just this week. Engineering reports unprecedented efficiency improvements. It's as if the food is affecting our cognitive function. Zethka considered this while sampling the pancakes. The combination of textures, soft interior with slightly crisp exterior, the way the sweet syrup complemented rather than overwhelmed the subtle flavors of the pancakes themselves, created a sense of satisfaction that seemed to extend beyond mere nutrition. What do you think is causing these changes, Lieutenant? Permission to speak freely, sir? Granted. I think the humans have discovered something we lost, sir. When we optimized our society for efficiency, we eliminated what they call pleasure. But pleasure isn't just unnecessary indulgence. It's actually a catalyst for creativity, cooperation, and innovation. The insight was remarkably sophisticated for a junior officer, but Zethka was learning that the human food experience seemed to enhance thinking in unexpected ways. Explain. Well, sir, consider our traditional approach to problem solving. We analyze data, apply logical frameworks, implement optimal solutions. It's efficient, but it's also limiting. The humans approach problems differently. They seem to enjoy the process of discovery, to find satisfaction in exploration itself, not just in reaching conclusions. Zethka finished the pancakes and found himself reaching for the bacon. Thin strips of meat that had been cooked until crispy, creating entirely new flavors and textures through the application of controlled heat. The concept of transforming food through cooking was revealing itself as more than just preparation. It was a form of creative innovation. Continue your analysis, Lieutenant. The food sharing has changed how we interact, sir. Instead of maintaining efficient hierarchical distance, we're engaging as individuals with personal interests and perspectives. That engagement has led to cross-pollination of ideas that wouldn't occur in our standard operational framework. A communications signal interrupted them. Commander, came Captain Vexti's voice. High Command is requesting an immediate status update on the human assessment. They're specifically asking for threat level classification and strategic recommendations. Zethka felt a familiar tension in his secondary arms, the physical response that accompanied difficult decisions. His duty was clear: provide High Command with the information they needed to determine Vorthack policy toward humanity. But his recent experiences had revealed complexities that couldn't be captured in standard military categories. Thank you, Lieutenant. Your observations have been illuminating. Please report to Dr. Rodriguez and continue your study of human food culture. Consider it a special assignment. Kexamo's surprise was evident. Sir, we're going to need to understand this phenomenon completely before we make our final report. Go. After the lieutenant left, Zethka returned to his holographic display, but instead of working on his report, he opened a communication channel to the human ship. Ambassador Chun, he said when her image appeared, I have a request that may sound unusual. Of course, Commander. How can we help? I would like to invite you and your team to visit our ship for a meal. But not a human meal. I want to show you what Vorthack nutrition looks like, and I want to understand your perspective on our approach. Chen's expression showed interest mixed with curiosity. We be honored, Commander. 2 hours later, Zethka led the human delegation through the corridors of his ship toward the standard mess facility. The humans looked around with obvious fascination at the clean, efficient architecture, everything designed for optimal function with no unnecessary ornamentation. Your ship is remarkably efficient, Dr. Rodriguez observed. Every space has a clear purpose. Efficiency is the highest virtue in Vorthack design philosophy, Zethka replied. Unnecessary elements are eliminated. They entered the mess facility, a large, sterile room with rows of identical tables and dispensing units along the walls. Crew members sat at proper intervals, consuming their nutrient blocks in silence. The entire process took exactly 12 minutes, after which personnel returned to their duties. Colonel Murphy looked around with barely concealed amazement. Commander, where's the kitchen? Where's the food preparation area? Food preparation? Zethka was genuinely confused. The nutrient blocks are manufactured in processing facilities on our homeworld according to exact nutritional specifications. They require no preparation. He led them to one of the dispensing units and withdrew 4 gray cubes, each identical in size, shape, and composition. These contain precisely the nutrients, minerals, and compounds required for optimal Vorthack physiological function. One block provides 12 hours of nutritional support. Ambassador Chun accepted one of the cubes, examining it carefully. May we try this? Of course, though I should warn you. They are optimized for Vorthack biology. You may find them incomplete. The humans each took a small bite of the nutrient block. Zethka watched their faces carefully, seeing expressions he couldn't quite interpret. Commander, Dr. Rodriguez said slowly, this is the most efficient food I've ever encountered. Perfect nutrition, no waste, no unnecessary elements. Yes, is that not preferable to the chaotic complexity of human food? Well, Chun said diplomatically, it's certainly efficient. But, Commander, may I ask, do your people look forward to meals? The question was so foreign to Vorthack experience that Zethka had to pause to make sure he understood it correctly. Look forward to nutrition consumption? Yes. Do you anticipate meal times with pleasure? Do you enjoy the experience of eating? The consumption of nutrients is a biological necessity. There is no emotional component. But that's exactly what we're talking about, Colonel Murphy said. Commander, in human culture, meals aren't just about nutrition. They're about pleasure, anticipation, memory, social bonding. We look forward to good meals. We remember exceptional ones for years. We use food to celebrate, to comfort, to bring people together. Dr. Rodriguez was scanning the nutrient block with a portable analyzer. Commander, this is remarkable from a nutritional standpoint, but it's designed to be consumed quickly and forgotten. There's nothing to savor, nothing to enjoy, nothing to remember. Is that problematic? Not problematic, Chin said carefully, but limiting. Commander, think about your recent experiences with human food. How do those meals make you feel? Zethka considered the question seriously. They created responses I had no framework for understanding. Pleasure, satisfaction, anticipation, and something else, a sense of connection to the other beings sharing the experience. Exactly. Food, for humans, is a gateway to broader emotional and social experiences. It's not just fuel. It's a catalyst for community, creativity, and joy. As if summoned by their conversation, Captain Vexti approached with what appeared to be a violation of every regulation Zethka could think of. His second-in-command was carrying a large container that filled the sterile mess facility with the warm, complex aromas of human cooking. Captain, Zethka said carefully, what is that? Sir, I took the liberty of working with a human cook to prepare what they call a potluck meal for our entire crew. Each person contributed something, creating a shared feast. The container held an impossible variety of foods, some that Zethka recognized from previous experiences, others that were completely new. But more significant than the food itself was what happened next. Word of the potluck spread through the ship with remarkable speed. Within minutes, crew members began gathering in the mess facility, not for efficient nutrition consumption, but for something unprecedented in Vorthack military history, a voluntary social meal. Zethka watched in fascination as his crew transformed the sterile eating facility into something resembling the warm dining space on the human ship. Personnel who normally maintained proper hierarchical distance were sitting together, sharing food, engaging in animated conversations. Commander, Science Officer Quinare approached, carrying a plate loaded with various human foods. I've been analyzing the neurological effects of this food-sharing behavior. The chemical responses in our brains are creating enhanced creativity, improved problem-solving, and increased social bonding. You're saying the food is changing our brain function? Not the food itself, sir. The pleasure responses triggered by the food, combined with the social interaction patterns, are activating neural pathways that our traditional nutrition approach never stimulates. We're literally thinking differently. Ambassador Chun had been listening to this exchange. Commander, that's exactly what we've been trying to explain. Food isn't just nutrition. It's a technology for enhancing life experience. As Zethka observed his crew engaging in this unprecedented social feast, he realized he was witnessing something that would fundamentally change his report to high command. The humans hadn't just shown them a different approach to nutrition. They had revealed an entirely different philosophy of existence. But that realization came with a sobering recognition. High Command would not understand. The Vorthack Empire had built its entire civilization on the principle that efficiency and optimization were the highest virtues. The idea that pleasure and social connection could actually enhance rather than detract from performance would be seen as dangerous thinking. Yet the evidence was undeniable. His crew was functioning better, thinking more creatively, and cooperating more effectively since beginning their food experiences with the humans. They had accidentally discovered that the human approach to life might not be primitive. It might be superior. The question was, what was he going to do about it? The emergency communication from High Command arrived at the worst possible moment. Commander Zethka was in the middle of what humans called a cooking lesson with Dr. Rodriguez, learning to prepare something called soup, a liquid food that somehow managed to be both simple and incredibly complex simultaneously. Commander, Captain Vexti's voice carried an edge of concern through the ship's communication system. Admiral Thexvon is demanding immediate conference. Priority 1. Zethka set down the wooden implement Dr. Rodriguez had called a spoon and straightened his uniform. Priority 1 meant the Admiral suspected something was wrong with the mission. Badly wrong. Dr. Rodriguez, I apologize, but I must attend to military duties. The human scientist nodded understandingly. Of course, Commander. But, may I ask, how are you planning to explain what we've been learning to your superiors? It was the question that had been haunting Zethka for days. How could he possibly convey the significance of human food culture to beings who had never experienced pleasure eating? How could he explain that what appeared to be inefficient indulgence was actually a sophisticated technology for enhancing cognitive function and social cooperation? I don't know, he admitted, but I'll find a way. In his ready room, the holographic image of Admiral Thexvon materialized with typical Vorthack efficiency. No unnecessary pleasantries, no wasted time on social interaction. Commander Zethka, your scheduled reports have been inadequate. I'm seeing references to food studies and cultural immersion protocols that do not appear in any authorized mission parameters. Explain. Zethka had served under Admiral Thexvon for 15 years. The Admiral was brilliant, dedicated, and absolutely committed to Vorthack military doctrine. He was also completely incapable of understanding concepts that fell outside established frameworks. Admiral, the humans have demonstrated technological and social capabilities that require deeper study than standard protocols allow. I see reference to your crew participating in shared meals with alien personnel. This is a severe breach of contamination protocols, Commander. Sir, the food sharing has proven to be a critical component of human diplomatic and social structure. To understand their capabilities, we needed to understand their methods. Commander, the Admiral's voice carried the dangerous calm that preceded disciplinary action. You were sent to assess military threats and technological capabilities. I'm reading reports about pleasure responses and enhanced creativity. These are not military priorities. With respect, Admiral, they may be more militarily significant than we initially understood. The Admiral's 4 eyes focused with laser intensity. Explain. This was the moment Zethka had been dreading. How could he possibly convey what he had learned without sounding like he had lost his military bearing entirely? Admiral, the humans have developed what appears to be a biological enhancement technology disguised as nutrition. Their food consumption patterns trigger neurological responses that increase creativity, cooperation, and problem-solving ability. The military applications are substantial. You're suggesting their nutrition serves a combat function? Not directly, sir. But indirectly, their approach to food has created a species that thinks more flexibly, adapts more quickly, and cooperates more effectively than standard Vorthack protocols would predict. There was a long pause. Commander, you sound as though you've been compromised by alien influence. The accusation hit like a physical blow. In Vorthack military culture, compromise by alien influence was among the most serious charges possible. It implied that an officer's loyalty and judgment had been corrupted by contact with foreign ideas. But as Zethka considered the accusation, he realized it might be accurate. He had been changed by his contact with human food culture. His thinking had become more flexible, his social relationships more complex, his entire approach to problem-solving more creative. The question was whether that represented compromise or enhancement. Admiral, I request permission to demonstrate the phenomenon rather than simply describe it. Negative, Commander. You will submit your final assessment within 6 hours and prepare to depart human space. Your crew will undergo full decontamination and psychological evaluation upon return. The communication ended, leaving Zethka staring at the blank holographic projector. 6 hours to complete a report that would determine not just the future of human-Vorthack relations, but the future direction of his own career and possibly his species' development. He was still contemplating this impossible task when his door chimed. Enter. To his surprise, his entire senior staff filed in. Captain Vex T, Science Officer Quinare, Lieutenant Keximo, and Engineering Officer Nexka. All carried human food containers, and all showed the relaxed, confident bearing that had become characteristic since their culinary experiences began. Commander, Captain Vex T said, we heard about the communication from High Command. We have a proposal. Proceed, but be aware that Admiral Thex1 has expressed concerns about alien compromise of his crew. Yes, sir. And, frankly, he's right. We have been changed by our contact with human food culture. But, sir, we've been changed for the better. Science Officer Quinare stepped forward. Commander, I've been analyzing our performance metrics since beginning the food experiences. Efficiency is up 17%. Creative problem solving has improved by over 30%. Interdepartmental cooperation has reached levels I've never recorded. The crew morale indicators, added Engineering Officer Nexka, are off the charts. Personnel who used to fulfill duties with mechanical precision are now actively seeking ways to improve systems and solve problems. Lieutenant Keximo opened his container, releasing the now familiar complex aromas. Sir, we've been discussing this among ourselves. What if the humans haven't developed an inefficient society focused on pleasure? What if they've developed a more advanced society that realizes efficiency isn't the only important metric? Explain. The Vorthack Empire achieved remarkable technological advancement through our focus on optimization, Vex T said. But we've also achieved stagnation. When did we last have a truly revolutionary breakthrough? When did we last discover something that fundamentally changed our understanding of existence? Zethka considered this question seriously. The Vorthack had been technologically advanced for over 2 centuries, but their captain was right. They had achieved a plateau of efficient functionality without significant innovation or growth. The humans, Quinare continued, maintain what appears to be chaos and inefficiency, but which actually generates constant innovation and adaptation. Their food culture is a perfect example. It serves no obvious survival function, but it creates the social and neurological conditions that foster creativity and cooperation. What are you proposing? The officers exchanged glances before Captain Vex T responded. Sir, we want to recommend that the Vorthack Empire enter into a cultural exchange program with humanity. Not to adopt their chaotic approach wholesale, but to integrate elements of their pleasure-based technologies into our efficiency-based systems. You're suggesting we modify fundamental aspects of Vorthack civilization based on what we've learned about human cooking? Yes, sir, Keximo replied without hesitation. Because we've discovered that what humans call quality of life isn't a luxury. It's a technology for enhancing performance. Engineering Officer Nexka opened her container, revealing something that had become a crew favorite, human bread with various toppings that created complex flavor combinations. Commander, consider this. Our traditional nutrition provides exactly what our bodies need for survival. Human food provides what their minds and social systems need for innovation and growth. Zethka accepted a piece of the bread, noting how the simple act of sharing food continued to create an atmosphere of collaborative thinking that was unprecedented in his military experience. Officers, he said carefully, what you're proposing would represent a fundamental challenge to Vorthack philosophy. High Command will consider it subversive thinking. Sir, Captain Vex T said quietly, what if subversive thinking is exactly what the Vorthack Empire needs? The question hung in the air like the aroma from the human food. Complex, challenging, impossible to ignore. Explain. We've achieved perfect efficiency, sir. But efficiency toward what end? We've optimized survival, resource utilization, and technological function. But we've never asked whether survival and efficiency are sufficient goals for an advanced civilization. Science Officer Quinare consulted his datapad. Sir, I've been studying human historical records. They've survived planetary disasters, wars, technological disruptions, and social upheavals that would have destroyed a more efficient species. They survived because their inefficient focus on pleasure and social bonding created resilience and adaptability. You're saying their apparent weaknesses are actually strengths? I'm saying their approach to life as something to be enjoyed rather than merely optimized has created capabilities that our approach lacks, Quinare replied. And, sir, I believe this food culture is the key to understanding how they achieve that balance. Lieutenant Keximo leaned forward eagerly. Commander, what if we could give the Vorthak Empire the best of both approaches? Keep our technological efficiency, but add human-style pleasure technologies to enhance creativity and social cooperation. The result would be a civilization that's both advanced and adaptable, Nexka added. Efficient enough to function, but flexible enough to grow. Zethka looked around the room at his senior staff, officers he had served with for years, beings he trusted with his life and the lives of his crew. They were asking him to do something that went far beyond his mission parameters. They were asking him to recommend a fundamental shift in Vorthak civilization. But as he considered their proposal while savoring the complex flavors of human bread, he realized they were right. His species had achieved remarkable advancement through their focus on efficiency, but they had also achieved a form of stagnation. They had optimized themselves into a corner where growth and innovation were difficult because anything new was, by definition, inefficient compared to established optimal solutions. The humans had shown them a different path, one that embraced inefficiency in service of innovation, that valued experience as much as achievement, that understood pleasure as a tool for enhancing rather than undermining performance. Officers, he said finally, prepare detailed analysis reports on everything you've observed about human food culture and its effects on our crew performance. Include specific recommendations for potential integration into Vorthak society. Sir, Captain Vexti looked surprised. Are you planning to recommend cultural exchange with humanity? I'm planning to recommend something far more significant than that, Captain. I'm planning to recommend that the Vorthak Empire consider the possibility that we've been wrong about the relationship between efficiency and advancement. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft sound of humans and Vorthak sharing another meal somewhere else on the ship, a sound that had become the background music of a quiet revolution. Sir, Keximo said quietly, High Command isn't going to understand. No, Zethka agreed, they're not. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to help them learn. As his officers left to prepare their reports, Zethka remained behind, staring at the communications console that would carry his recommendations across space to the Vorthak homeworld. Whatever he wrote in the next few hours would determine whether this extraordinary discovery would benefit his people or be buried as the ravings of a compromised officer. He picked up another piece of human bread, savoring both its complex flavor and the even more complex decision he was about to make. Commander Zethka stood before the holographic display in his ready room, reviewing the most important document he had ever written. The final report to High Command lay before him. Not the standard military assessment they expected, but something unprecedented in Vorthak history, a recommendation for fundamental cultural evolution. The document was structured in traditional Vorthak format to maintain credibility, but its contents were revolutionary. Instead of focusing on human military capabilities or technological threats, he had written a comprehensive analysis of what he termed pleasure-based enhancement technologies and their potential applications to Vorthak society. His door chimed. Enter. Ambassador Chen stepped inside, carrying what had become her customary peace offering, a container of human food. This time it appeared to be something called cookies, small circular objects that emitted an aroma of sweetness and comfort. Commander, she said, Captain Vexti mentioned you've been working on your report for several days without rest. In human culture, we have something called stress eating, consuming comfort foods to help process difficult emotions and decisions. Zethka accepted one of the cookies, noting how the simple act of accepting food from Ambassador Chun had become a gesture of trust and friendship rather than mere politeness. The cookie itself was extraordinary, crispy on the edges but soft in the center with small dark pieces that burst with intense flavor. Chocolate chips, Chun explained, seeing his reaction to the flavor bursts. One of humanity's greatest culinary innovations, The discovery that you can embed one delicious thing inside another delicious thing to create exponential pleasure. The concept struck Zethka as a perfect metaphor for what he was trying to communicate in his report. Human food culture wasn't just about nutrition. It was about embedding one beneficial system inside another to create results greater than the sum of their parts. Ambassador, he said carefully, I'm about to submit a report that will either revolutionize Vorthack society or end my military career. Possibly both. What are you recommending? That my people enter into comprehensive cultural exchange with humanity, specifically focused on integrating pleasure-based technologies into our efficiency-based society. I'm suggesting that what we initially dismissed as primitive indulgence may actually represent a more advanced approach to civilization. Chen's expression showed a mixture of excitement and concern. Commander, that's extraordinary. But you're right to worry about the consequences. Revolutionary ideas are often met with resistance, even when they're beneficial, especially when they challenge fundamental assumptions about the nature of advancement and civilization. They were interrupted by the ship's communication system. Commander, came Captain Vext's voice. Admiral Thexvon is requesting immediate conference. He's received preliminary copies of our crew reports and is concerned. Zethka felt his secondary arms tense. Preliminary reports meant the Admiral had been conducting surveillance on the mission, reviewing crew communications and behavior analyses. He would have seen the performance improvements, the behavioral changes, and the unprecedented social cooperation that had developed since food sharing began. Thank you, Captain. Establish connection in 5 minutes. Ambassador, Chun stood to leave. Commander, whatever happens, remember that you've made the right choice. Sometimes the most important discoveries come from the most unexpected sources. As she reached the door, Zethka called after her. Ambassador, thank you. Not just for the food, but for showing us that efficiency isn't the only path to advancement. Commander, she replied with a smile, thank you for being open to the possibility that there might be better ways to live. The holographic image of Admiral Thexvon materialized with characteristic abruptness. This time, however, his usual composed demeanor showed cracks of what appeared to be genuine confusion and concern. Commander Zethka, the Admiral began without preamble, I've reviewed the preliminary reports from your crew. Science Officer Quinare has submitted a paper on pleasure-based cognitive enhancement that reads like fantasy rather than military intelligence. Captain Vexti has filed recommendations for social nutrition protocols that have no basis in Vorthack doctrine. And Lieutenant Keximo has suggested implementing joy optimization systems throughout the fleet. Yes, sir. I can explain the scientific basis for these recommendations. Commander, your entire crew appears to have been compromised by alien influence. You've abandoned centuries of proven Vorthack methodology in favor of... what? Inefficient, pleasure-seeking behavior. This was the moment Zethka had been preparing for. He activated his own holographic display, showing the performance metrics his crew had compiled over the past week. Admiral, with respect, I ask you to examine the data before drawing conclusions. The display showed clear, measurable improvements across every performance category: problem-solving efficiency, creative innovation, crew cooperation, system optimization, and overall mission effectiveness. The numbers were undeniable, and they correlated directly with the introduction of human food sharing protocols. These metrics, Admiral Thexvon said slowly, show performance improvements that should be impossible under standard operational conditions. Yes, sir. The human pleasure-based enhancement technologies have created measurable improvements in our crew's cognitive and social function. You're suggesting that inefficient behavior has somehow improved efficiency? I'm suggesting, sir, that our definition of efficiency has been too narrow. We've optimized for individual task completion while ignoring the enhancement potential of social cooperation and psychological well-being. Zethka activated a second display showing comparative analysis between traditional Vorthack crew performance and their current metrics. The differences were dramatic enough to qualify as a paradigm shift. Admiral, the humans have developed what we initially categorized as primitive indulgence. But closer analysis reveals it to be an advanced technology for enhancing cognitive function, social cooperation, and adaptive capability. They've discovered that pleasure isn't opposed to efficiency. It can be a catalyst for superior performance. Commander, the Admiral's voice carried a warning tone, You're advocating for fundamental changes to Vorthack civilization based on eating alien food. I'm advocating for the integration of technologies that demonstrably enhance our capabilities, regardless of their origin or our preconceptions about their nature. There was a long pause as Admiral Thexvon studied the data displays. Zethka could see him struggling with the implications. The metrics were too clear to dismiss, but accepting them would require acknowledging that Vorthack civilization might not represent the pinnacle of advancement they had believed. Commander, even if these improvements are genuine, implementing such changes would require approval from the High Council. The cultural implications alone. Sir, with respect, the cultural implications may be exactly what the Empire needs. We've achieved technological advancement and social stability, but we've also achieved stagnation. When did we last experience genuine innovation or growth? When did we last discover something that expanded our understanding rather than simply optimizing existing knowledge? The Admiral's four eyes fixed on Zethka with uncomfortable intensity. You're suggesting the Empire has become limited by its own success. I'm suggesting that our optimization for efficiency has eliminated elements that appear wasteful but are actually essential for continued growth and adaptation. Another pause, this one longer. Commander, what specific recommendations are you making? Zethka took a deep breath, or the Vorthack equivalent. I recommend immediate implementation of cultural exchange protocols with humanity, beginning with what they call culinary diplomacy. I recommend pilot programs testing pleasure-based enhancement technologies within selected military units. And I recommend that the High Council consider the possibility that advancement requires not just optimization, but also innovation, and innovation requires the kind of cognitive flexibility that pleasure-based systems can provide. You want the Vorthack Empire to learn how to cook. I want the Vorthack Empire to learn how to experience joy, Admiral. Because I believe joy is not opposed to efficiency. It's a more advanced form of it. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected sound. Another voice on the Admiral's communication channel. Admiral Thexvon, came the distinctive harmonics of High Counselor Nexquin. I've been monitoring this conversation with great interest. Zethka felt his career flash before his eyes. The High Counselor was known throughout the Empire as the ultimate arbiter of military policy and cultural direction. Her involvement in this conversation could only mean that his recommendations had already reached the highest levels of government. High Counselor, Admiral Thexvon said, his tone shifting to formal respect. I was preparing to submit a full analysis of Commander Zethka's unusual mission findings. That won't be necessary, Admiral. We've been monitoring the crew performance metrics in real time. The improvements are remarkable enough to warrant immediate attention. Zethka realized his hands were shaking slightly, another physiological response that seemed to have intensified since he began experiencing human food culture. High Counselor, he said carefully, the performance improvements are genuine, but they represent only the beginning of what these technologies could offer the Empire. Explain, Commander. The humans have maintained their capacity for innovation and adaptation through what appears to be inefficiency, but is actually sophisticated social and psychological enhancement. They've learned to optimize not just for survival, but for the psychological conditions that enable continued growth. And you believe the Vorthack Empire could benefit from such an approach. I believe the Empire could be transformed by it. High Counselor, we could maintain our technological advancement while adding the adaptive capacity and innovative potential that our current optimization approach has eliminated. There was a pause that seemed to stretch across space and time. Commander Zethka, you are hereby ordered to remain in human space and expand your cultural analysis. Admiral Thexvon, you will coordinate with the High Council to establish formal diplomatic relations with humanity. We are implementing immediate pilot programs based on Commander Zethka's preliminary findings. The communication ended, leaving Zethka staring at the blank holographic display in shocked silence. He had expected court-martial and disgrace. Instead, he had apparently initiated the first fundamental shift in Vorthack cultural policy in centuries. His door chimed again, and this time his entire senior staff entered, along with a human delegation. Captain Vexti was carrying what appeared to be a large, elaborate cake. Commander, Ambassador Chen said with obvious delight, we heard about the communication from your High Council. In human culture, we celebrate significant achievements with something called a party, a social gathering focused entirely on shared joy and food. As his crew and the humans arranged the impromptu celebration, Zethkar realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. The beginning of a new chapter in galactic civilization, one where efficiency and pleasure worked together to create possibilities that neither could achieve alone. The cake, when he tasted it, was somehow both the end of his old understanding of existence and the beginning of something far more wonderful. It was sweet, complex, and entirely unnecessary for survival, which made it perfect for living. 6 months later, as he watched the first joint Vorthack Human Culinary Academy graduate its initial class of Joy Engineers, Commander Zethkar reflected on how a simple shared meal had become the catalyst for the most significant advancement in Vorthack civilization since they had achieved spaceflight. The humans had taught his people something more valuable than technology or tactics. They had taught them how to find meaning and connection in the simple act of sharing pleasure. And that lesson was transforming not just individual lives, but the entire trajectory of galactic civilization. As he bit into his daily cookie, now a requirement rather than an indulgence, Zethkar smiled, an expression that had become as natural to his species as efficiency once was. The universe, it turned out, tasted much better than they had ever imagined.